On this episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, we are talking about two very critically acclaimed cars, the Toyota/Subaru GT86 and the Honda S2000. These two cars have more parallels than you might think, but more importantly, I'm here to talk about why this car is going to suffer the same fate as the S2000. Welcome everyone to another episode of Eat, Sleep, Drive, and of course we're talking about the BRZ/FRS/GT86 and the S2000 today, two very iconic platforms in the sports car marketplace. Front engine, rear wheel drive, naturally aspirated, and of course one is now defunct and one isn't yet, at least, and that's what we're going to be discussing today. Now, if you've seen my last video, you saw that I picked this car up. It was the cheapest FRS/GT86 in the country, and I did a whole video of that. So if you're interested in that kind of content, definitely subscribe. There's going to be more from this car. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about the S2000 and its parallels with this car, because as I've driven it, got to know the car more, and then really reflected on it, really more than just like their driving characters are very similar, and that's what we're going to get into today. Unfortunately, it's not looking good for the GT86. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk numbers first. I'm going to give you guys proof as to why I think that this car is unfortunately going to get the axe from Toyota/Subaru, the same way the S2000 did. And then we're going to talk about why that's happening, like why the numbers are not looking good for the GT86. And then finally, I'll leave you with basically my thoughts on which one I think is going to be, collectible or really a long-term hold as far as the value of each car going forward.
So let's talk those numbers, shall we? Let's start first with the BRZ/FRS US sales numbers. The sales numbers are really what I'm going to be primarily talking about today, because that's really what is like the driving force behind if a car stays or if it goes. If it sells well, it stays. If it doesn't sell well, it obviously doesn't. So here we go, 2012 to 2018 sales figures. Now, part of this graph right here you can see is a little bit askew because they started selling FRSs in 2012. They didn't start selling BRZs until 2013. So this is a little bit askew. Like, for the most part, this graph is basically just trending down. It's just sort of a breakup of a model year here. But as you can see in these sales figures here, I've totaled up the BRZ and FRS. And basically, yeah, they're just declining heavily in production numbers and sales numbers, which is really not a surprise. There's a slight level off here from when they got a mild refresh in 2017. These are model year by production number in order, and I did that so I could show you the S2000 numbers as well in order. So basically, model year 1 would be 2000 and model year 10 is 2009. But anyway, here's the sales numbers. Now, you can't compare these cars exactly like unit for unit, because this S2000 was a more expensive car for money at the time. But you can clearly see that they're both trending downward. And more importantly, like when I overlay these graphs, I know we're really nerding out here, but like look at this trend here. I mean, once again, forgetting this sort of anomaly with the 2012 and 2013 cars being produced by the FRS, but basically just trending down. And even like from 2003 to 2004, 2005, which would have been right around here in the S2000 run when it got a mild refresh, you could see it spiked up a little bit. The sales kind of kept going because there was a little bit of something new at least to buy. And same thing here, 2016 to 2017 in the BRZ FRS, you have the same situation where it got a little, a slight power bump, a slight suspension tweak, a little bit exterior. So sales kind of leveled off. But I mean, look at how similar these graphs are, just from an overall standpoint and trending standpoint. So where can we expect the next couple years of the FRS and BRZ? Unfortunately, I'm thinking it's going to be down here with the Honda S2000.
So I've shown you guys the facts and figures of the sales numbers of both the Honda S2000 and of course the GT86. And it's hard to deny the parallels between the two. Like clearly the S2000 is no longer in existence and the sales numbers declined over time, and the GT86 is following suit, as you can see. But the question is why? Why, after such a strong start, both these iconic cars ended up getting axed and having just such low sales numbers? It really boils down to too little, too late in the form of updates and refreshes on these cars. When the Honda S2000 came out, it had the highest horsepower per displacement of any naturally aspirated engine at the time. And what does that mean? So it was a 2-liter engine making 240 naturally aspirated horsepower. That's the most horsepower per liter of any production engine. So very incredible engine. It revved to 9,000 RPM. Just an engineering masterpiece. What did they do with that car over time? Well, 3 or 4 years later, in the 2004 model year, they bumped the displacement a little bit to a 2.2 liter, decreased the red line from 9,000 to 8,000 RPM, and it made basically the same power, but a little more low-end torque, because allegedly that's what Americans want, is more low-end torque. If you ask some people, they like the way that engine drives a little more from a daily driver standpoint. That is the later engine. But I would say, collectability-wise or most, fun-wise, you can't go wrong with an engine that revs to 9,000 RPM. So while they did refresh that engine, it wasn't an amazing refresh. It didn't make any more power. Once again, it made a little more torque, but no more horsepower. So it really left a lot to be desired. Well, guess what? The Toyota GT86 is the same exact way. It came out with 200 horsepower and had that for several years before they finally updated it in 2017 on both the BRZ and the GT86. Guess how much horsepower it got additional? 5 horsepower. Really no actual hardware modifications. The only modifications that it got were a ECU tune, which basically everyone already does anyways. So 5 horsepower is not significant enough to draw in new buyers. So this is the first failure of both of these companies on not significantly updating the powertrain in the cars. So surely there were some other updates, right? Other than the 5 horsepower that the GT86 got or the little bit of more torque that the S2000 got. Well, that's true. They did revise the suspension in this car just like they did in the S2000. Once again, in that mild refresh in the S2000, the 2003 to 2004, they revised the suspension a little bit because people claimed that it snap oversteered and it was a little hairy to drive at the limit. That wasn't exactly the case for this car. It's always been super well balanced, but they did refine the suspension tuning slightly in 2017. But by no means was this a very big change. It was really just changing the dampening rates on these cars. So, once again, the very, very minor updates in the form of engine and suspension tuning. And considering that the S2000 ran for 10 years, you would typically see a major refresh in that time, not a minor refresh. A minor refresh is not going to bring in a whole bunch of new sales like a major refresh is. So basically the S2000 got left dying on the vine, and this car is about to follow suit. There is, however, one more thing that they did change. Both of these cars, in my opinion, were quite attractive originally, but of course, when you're going down the line and you're trying to sell more cars to people that maybe have bought it in the past, you really need to update it more, even in the styling department. Now, once again, I think the GT86 was a good looking car to begin with. I think the S2000 was. The S2000 got a mild update in 2004, and let me show you the image between these two. Not a whole lot going on here. They look identical. Well, guess what? Here's an image of the 2016 BRZ and the 2017 BRZ. Yeah, exactly. They look almost identical. The only difference being, the newer one got some LED taillights, which somebody has already done on basically every 86 out there in existence. So the car didn't really get refreshed at all, and that's what I'm trying to drive home. And that's the unfortunate part that killed these cars. There was no significant refresh in them, so it's not motivating anyone to replace their old one. So that really leads me with, where are these cars going long term? The S2000 has of course been out for a much longer time than the GT86, and the GT86 is still in production. So obviously the value of GT86s is going to continue to go down because it's still new. They're still coming out with new ones. The old ones are getting older. That's why I picked this one up so cheap. But what about the S2000? Those cars, as I've already predicted in previous videos, are going up in value. They have definitely already hit their bottom and are on their way back up. It's a great chassis, it's super fun to drive, and you're never gonna see a car like that again. That's naturally aspirated and revs to 9,000 RPM. The S2000 is the long-term hold in this scenario. I think the 86 is a little more cheaply built after I've been driving this one for a while. Keep in mind, the S2000 when it came out in 2000 was $32,000. In 2012, that's about $42,000 in that sort of money. This is a $26,000 car. So obviously you're gonna get a little more well-built car in the S2000. Well guys, that's it. Unfortunately, this wasn't a very happy video. It's never really good news to hear that a very iconic, fun car is getting the axe and ending in production. I'm not super happy to share that news, but I really want to turn this into a plead for everyone to plead with Subaru and Toyota to get this car properly refreshed so it doesn't die on the vine like the S2000. It's too good for it to just go away into oblivion. It would be really sad. I really think this car will just fundamentally become the 240SX. The 240SX, great platform, not incredibly well made, so I don't think there's like a lot of long-term collectability there, but I think there is a little bit to be desired down the line because there's just not going to be much like this anymore. Small, lightweight, rear-wheel drive coupe that has a gas engine, they're just going away. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to follow me in between episodes, check me out on Instagram at Eat Sleep Drive TV. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode, and if you enjoy the GT86 content, make sure you subscribe because there's going to be a lot more from this car. Little bit of counter steer. It's so fun though. Oh man.